Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone.
There's a particular kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from sitting in the same room as someone you love, someone you've maybe loved for decades, and feeling nothing but a wall of cold air between you. No yelling, no names being called, just a silence. A silence so thick and deliberate that you could almost reach out and touch it. And somehow that hurts more than any words ever could. If you've ever sat at a kitchen table and watched someone you care about walk right past you, no eye contact, no acknowledgement, as if you simply didn't exist, then you already know what I'm talking about. That hollow, sinking feeling in your chest. That little voice that starts asking, what did I do? What's wrong with me? Why won't they just talk to me? You're not imagining it. And you're not overreacting. That's the first thing I want you to hear today. And I want you to really let it land. You are not overreacting. We've been taught, especially women of our generation, to smooth things over, to not rock the boat, to keep the peace at whatever cost the peace demands. We learned early that our feelings were inconvenient. Too big, too much. We learned to shrink them down, tuck them away, apologize for having them in the first place. So when someone uses silence as a weapon against us, something deeply cruel happens. We don't just feel the pain of being shut out. We start turning that pain inward. We start interrogating ourselves. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I asked for too much. Maybe if I just said it differently, chosen a better moment, been a little less. And there it is, less. That word we've carried for so long it's worn grooves into our souls. The silent treatment, and I want to be very intentional about calling it what it is not someone needing space. It is not someone being too hurt to talk right now. Those are real things, and they look different. Real emotional withdrawal says, I need a little time, but I'm not going anywhere. The silent treatment says nothing, on purpose. Because the goal isn't healing, the goal is control. I remember a woman, I'll call her Margaret, though she's a composite of so many conversations I've sat inside, who told me she had spent 31 years in a marriage where, anytime she voiced a need or a concern, or even a quiet difference of opinion, the response was days of complete emotional lockdown. Her husband wouldn't speak to her, wouldn't look at her, would answer questions from the children, but act as though Margaret had simply ceased to exist. She told me, after a while, I stopped bringing things up. I stopped having opinions. It was just easier. And then she paused and she looked at her hands and she said something that has never left me, but I think I disappeared somewhere in all that quiet. Do you feel that? Because I do. That word disappeared, not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly. The way a candle doesn't blow out in a storm but gutters, and finally goes dark in the stillness. Here's what the research tells us, and here's what lived experience confirms with even more certainty. Being on the receiving end of prolonged silence from someone who matters to you activates the exact same neural pathways as physical pain. Your brain doesn't distinguish between a wound you can see and one you can't. The hurt is real. The damage is real. The confusion, that maddening, disorienting confusion of not knowing what you did, or when it will end, or what it will take to make it stop. That is a kind of psychological weight that accumulates over time. And here's the part that breaks my heart just a little every time I say it. Most women I've spoken with, women who've lived inside this dynamic for years, don't call it abuse. They call it their relationship. They call it just the way he is. They call it something I must have caused. They have carried this weight so long and so quietly that it has started to feel like their own. So before we go any further, before we talk about where this comes from, what it does to you over time, and what healing actually looks like, I need to ask you something. Not as a psychologist, not as an expert. As someone who understands what it costs a woman to keep showing up, keep reaching out, keep hoping in the face of deliberate silence. When is the last time someone made you feel like you were worth speaking to? Sit with that for a moment, because everything else we explore together starts right there. In that question, and in whatever feeling just moved through your chest when you read it. You haven't disappeared. You're still here, and that matters more than you know. Let's talk about what's actually going on. Because one of the cruelest things about the silent treatment is that it leaves you with no information and all the feelings. There's nothing to respond to, nothing to defend yourself against, nothing to fix. Just this vast, echoing emptiness where a relationship used to breathe, and your mind, desperate for resolution, starts filling that emptiness with the worst possible explanations. That's not weakness, that's neuroscience. Your brain is wired for connection, deeply, fundamentally, at a survival level wired for it. Social belonging isn't a luxury your nervous system enjoys. It's something your nervous system requires. So when connection is suddenly, deliberately withdrawn by someone whose presence matters to you, your brain goes into a kind of quiet panic. It starts scanning, searching, replaying conversations, looking for the moment things went wrong, cataloging your own behavior for evidence of whatever crime you must have committed. And while your brain is doing all of that exhausting, fruitless detective work, the other person is simply waiting. Watching, in control. That's the architecture of it. And once you see it clearly, it changes everything. The silent treatment isn't born from strength. I want you to really absorb that, because the person delivering it often carries themselves with such cold composure that it feels like strength. It feels like they have something you don't, some emotional fortress you can't penetrate, some discipline you haven't earned. But here's the unspoken truth underneath all that composed silence. It's a strategy used by people who don't have the emotional tools or the willingness to engage with conflict directly. That's it. That's the whole architecture. When someone lacks the capacity to say, "I'm hurt," or "I'm angry," or "I need something from you that I don't know how to ask for," when vulnerability feels too dangerous or honesty feels too risky, silence becomes the weapon of choice. It punishes without exposure. It controls without accountability. It says, "You've done something wrong," while never, ever having to specify what. And because it leaves no fingerprints, it's extraordinarily easy for the person using it to deny that anything is happening at all. "I'm not doing anything. I just don't have anything to say." Sound familiar? Psychologists have a term for this pattern when it becomes chronic. When it's not a one-time withdrawal, but a recurring dynamic. A cycle that you've lived through enough times that you can almost feel it coming before it arrives. We call it coercive control through emotional withdrawal. And it operates on a very simple, very effective behavioral principle. If silence creates enough discomfort in you, enough anxiety, enough desperate reaching, you will eventually do whatever it takes to end it. You'll apologize for things you didn't do. You'll minimize your own needs to avoid triggering it again. You'll reshape your personality, your opinions, your very way of moving through the world, trying to become someone who doesn't provoke the silence. And the terrible irony, the part that keeps women trapped in this for years, sometimes for entire lifetimes, is that it works, not because you're weak, but because you're human, because you love the person, because you remember who they were before the silence became a habit, because leaving feels impossible and staying feels like slowly handing yourself over, piece by piece, until you're not entirely sure who's left. Margaret, remember her, told me she used to rehearse conversations in her head before she had them. Not to be articulate, not to be kind, but to preemptively remove anything that might trigger the shutdown. She'd strip her sentences down to the safest possible version of what she wanted to say. And she told me, by the time I actually spoke, I'd already said so much less than what I meant that I might as well have said nothing. She was doing to herself what he had trained her to do. Silencing herself before he could. That's the long game damage of this. Not just what it does to you in the moment, but what it teaches you to do to yourself. Now, I also want to hold some complexity here, because life is complicated and human beings rarely fit neatly into categories. Not every instance of quiet is weaponized. Not every person who pulls away is doing it deliberately. Some people, many people actually, grew up in homes where emotional conversation was simply never modeled, where feelings were dangerous or inconvenient or just not discussed, where the adults around them dealt with conflict by going quiet, and so that's the only language they learned. They're not calculating the damage they're causing. They genuinely don't have another vocabulary. That doesn't make it hurt less, but it does change what healing might look like. There's a meaningful difference between a partner who withdraws but is willing, truly willing, not performatively willing, to learn a different way of engaging, and one who uses silence consciously, repeatedly as leverage. One situation holds the possibility of genuine change. The other is a different conversation entirely, and we'll get there. But the reason I make that distinction now is because I've watched women spend enormous amounts of their emotional energy trying to determine which category their person falls into. Parsing every silence for intent. Wondering, is he hurting or is he punishing me? And I want to gently say that question, while understandable, can become its own trap. Because in either case, your pain is legitimate, your need for connection is legitimate, and your right to say, "This isn't working for me," doesn't depend on the other person's intentions. Your experience doesn't require their diagnosis. Here's something else I want to name, because it lives in the room even when we don't say it out loud. Many women in this age group, and I say this with deep tenderness, not judgment, have spent so many years being the emotional caretaker of everyone around them that they've lost the habit of asking, "What about what I need?" The children needed them. The parents needed them. The marriage needed them. The friendships, the community, the workplace, all of it flowing through them like they were the river that kept everything else alive. And somewhere in all of that giving, the question of their own emotional needs became almost impolite, self-indulgent even. So when someone treats them with silence, when they're met with emotional unavailability from someone who should be their sanctuary, they don't always reach for outrage. They reach for self-blame, because self-blame, as painful as it is, at least gives the illusion of control. If I caused it, then I can fix it. If it's about me, then the solution is in my hands. But sometimes the silence has nothing to do with you at all. Sometimes it's the other person's wound, their limitation, their unprocessed history, wearing your name, and you've been carrying their weight long enough. So now we arrive at the part that matters most. Not the understanding, as important as that is. Not the naming, the diagnosing, the finally seeing the pattern for what it is. All of that is necessary, but it's not the destination. The destination is you. The version of you that exists on the other side of this. The woman who has carried this weight long enough that she's forgotten what it feels like to set it down. This is where we talk about that. But I want to start healing in a place you might not expect. I don't want to start with strategies or boundaries or communication techniques. Those things matter, and we'll get there. But if we start there, we skip something essential. Something that has to come first. We need to start with grief. Because here's what nobody tells you about recovering from years of emotional withdrawal. Years of being silenced, dismissed, made to feel like your presence was something to be tolerated rather than treasured. There is grief in that recovery. Real, legitimate, sometimes overwhelming grief. Not just for what was done to you, but for the years. For the version of yourself you set aside trying to keep the peace. For the conversations you never got to have. For the intimacy that should have been there and wasn't. For the younger version of you who deserved so much better and didn't yet know it. She deserves to be mourned. That woman, the one who kept trying, kept reaching, kept making herself smaller, she wasn't foolish. She was faithful. She loved with everything she had. And part of healing is honoring that, rather than rushing past it towards something that looks more like progress. So if you've been feeling a sadness lately that you can't quite name, a heaviness that doesn't lift even on the good days, please know that it might not be weakness or depression or ingratitude. It might be grief doing exactly what grief is supposed to do, moving through you, asking to be felt. Let it. The next thing I want to talk about is something I call reclaiming your voice. And I mean that both literally and in every deeper sense of the phrase. One of the lasting effects of living with prolonged silence as punishment is that it trains you to distrust your own words. You start second guessing everything you want to say before you say it. You edit yourself constantly, not for clarity, not for kindness, but for safety. You become your own censor. And over time, that internal censorship becomes so automatic, so seamlessly woven into how you operate, that you stop noticing you're doing it. You just stop saying things, stop asking for things, stop expecting things. And that silence, the one you've absorbed into yourself, becomes the loneliest place of all. Because it's not imposed from the outside anymore. It lives inside you now, in the pause before you speak, in the words you swallow instead of offering, in the quiet whispers of self-doubt that sounds suspiciously like someone else's voice. Reclaiming your voice doesn't mean becoming loud. It doesn't mean confrontation for its own sake, or suddenly saying every unfiltered thing that passes through your mind. It means something quieter and more profound than that. It means deciding that what you think matters. What you feel matters. What you need matters. Not because someone gave you permission to believe that, but because it was always true, and it's time to stop waiting for someone else to confirm it. Here's a practice I've offered to women walking this road, and I offer it to you now. Find a place. It doesn't need to be grand or ceremonial, just somewhere that feels like yours. A corner of your bedroom, a chair by a window, a spot in a garden where the light hits in a way that makes you feel, just for a moment, like the world is on your side. Your sanctuary small, maybe, but yours. And in that place, start the habit of asking yourself 3 questions. Not once, regularly. Like tending something you want to keep alive. What am I actually feeling right now? Not what I think I should be feeling, but what is genuinely moving through me? What do I need today? Not what does everyone else need from me, but what does this woman, this particular soul, need in order to feel a little more like herself? What is one true thing I haven't let myself say out loud yet? You don't have to answer them perfectly. You don't have to do anything with the answers immediately. But the act of asking, of turning toward yourself with genuine curiosity instead of constant criticism, that is the beginning of something. That is the first quiet thread of coming home to yourself. Now let's talk about the practical terrain. Because healing isn't only interior work. Eventually it meets the real world and the real people in it. If you are still in a relationship where the silent treatment is a recurring dynamic, the most important thing I can tell you is this: you cannot love someone out of a pattern they aren't willing to examine. Love is not a cure for avoidance. Patience is not a cure for emotional immaturity. Devotion, and Lord knows many of you have given it in amounts that should have moved mountains, is not enough if the other person isn't willing to meet you halfway across the distance they created. That's not a failure of your love. That's just the truth of how change actually works. What can make a difference? When someone is genuinely willing, not just temporarily apologetic, is honest, structured conversation. Not in the heat of the silence, when the wound is fresh and the walls are up, but in a neutral moment, a calm moment, when you can say something like, "When you go silent after we disagree, I feel cut off and frightened, and I need us to find a different way through conflict together." Notice what that sentence does. It doesn't attack. It doesn't diagnose. It speaks from your experience. I feel I need, without making the other person solely responsible for all the meaning and all the healing. It opens a door instead of kicking one in. But, and this is the part that requires real honesty with yourself, you have to be willing to notice whether that door gets walked through, whether the conversation leads to actual change, or just a temporary thaw before the next freeze. Whether you're being met, or whether you're doing all the meeting, because your willingness to do the work doesn't obligate you to do it alone forever. For those of you who are on the other side of these relationships, who have left, or are healing in the aftermath, or are rebuilding a life that is yours in ways it perhaps hasn't been in a long time, I want to say something directly to you. The silence that was used against you may have followed you out the door. It has a way of doing that. You might find yourself in new relationships, new friendships, new situations, and still flinching when someone goes quiet. Still bracing. Still doing that exhausting internal calculation: what did I do? What do I need to fix? How do I make this okay? That's not a character flaw. That's a nervous system that learned to stay ready. And it can unlearn. Not overnight, not without patience and probably some real support, but it can. The weight we carry from years of emotional punishment doesn't dissolve the moment we walk away from its source. It travels with us for a while, tucked into the body, stored in the muscles and the instincts and the reflexes that kept us safe when safe was hard to find. Healing means slowly, gently, teaching that nervous system a new story. The story that says silence is no longer a threat. Quiet can be peaceful again. A pause in conversation doesn't mean abandonment. Someone not responding immediately doesn't mean you've become invisible. You are not invisible. You never were. There's a particular kind of courage, and I don't use that word lightly, in deciding after years of shrinking to take up space again, to speak when you have something to say, to ask for what you need without preemptively apologizing for needing it, to exist fully and without apology in your own life. It doesn't announce itself dramatically. It doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in small moments. The day you say something honest in a conversation and don't immediately backpedal. The day you feel a need and name it, even if only to yourself. The day you sit in your sanctuary in the light and realize the quiet around you feels like peace instead of punishment. Those moments are everything. They are the unspoken truths of your recovery, surfacing one by one, reminding you of who you were before the silence convinced you to become someone easier to ignore. She's still there. A little tired, maybe, but still there. And she has so much left to say. There's a moment that doesn't get talked about enough. Not the moment you recognize the pattern. Not the moment you finally name what's been happening to you, or the moment you decide something has to change. Those moments matter deeply, but there's another one, quieter and perhaps more significant than all of them. It's the moment you realize you're not waiting anymore. Not waiting for an apology that may never come. Not waiting for the other person to finally understand what they put you through. Not waiting to feel like yourself again until someone else gives you permission. You're just living, breathing, moving through your days with something that feels unfamiliar at first, almost suspicious in how gentle it is. Peace. Not the performed peace of someone who has suppressed everything too deep to feel it anymore. Not the brittle, held breath quiet of someone waiting for the next silence to fall. But real peace. The kind that has some texture to it, some earned wisdom, some sorrow that has been felt fully enough that it no longer runs the show. That moment is available to you. I need you to know that. Not as a platitude, not as a well-meaning promise I can't keep, but as something I have witnessed, again and again, in women who once sat exactly where you might be sitting right now, certain that the version of themselves they'd lost was simply gone for good. She wasn't gone. She was waiting. And so are you. Let's talk about what life actually looks like on the other side, because I think we do people a disservice when we make healing sound like a destination you arrive at cleanly, luggage unpacked, wound fully closed. It's not like that, and pretending it is sets you up to feel like you're failing when the grief surfaces again on a Tuesday afternoon for no particular reason. When a song comes on and suddenly you're back in that kitchen, in that silence, feeling 14 inches tall. When someone you love goes quiet for an afternoon and your heart does that old familiar lurch before your mind can catch up and remind you this is different. You are different. You are safe. Healing is not linear. Healing is not clean. Healing sometimes looks like 2 steps forward and 1 step sideways into a feeling you thought you were done with. And that's not failure. That's just the honest, unglamorous, deeply human reality of putting yourself back together after you've spent years coming apart in slow motion. What changes, what genuinely, fundamentally changes, is not that the hard feelings stop visiting. It's that you stop being afraid of them. You develop a relationship with your own emotional life that is less like being swept away and more like being a woman standing on a shore, watching the waves come in. They still come. But you're not drowning in them anymore. You know they'll recede. You know you'll still be standing when they do. That is a kind of strength that cannot be given to you. It can only be grown. And it grows almost always through exactly the kind of pain you've already survived. Something remarkable tends to happen when women in this season of life, women who have spent decades prioritizing everyone else's emotional comfort over their own, begin to genuinely heal from patterns of emotional abuse or neglect. They become, in the most beautiful and unexpected way, more themselves than they've ever been. Not harder. Not closed off or armored or permanently suspicious of love, but more distilled. Like everything that was added on top of them. The people-pleasing, the self-erasure, the constant monitoring of other people's moods starts to fall away, and what's underneath is someone with opinions and preferences and a particular way of laughing and things she's genuinely curious about, and a voice that, when she finally lets it speak at full volume, turns out to be extraordinary. That woman was always there. She just got very quiet for a very long time. And there is something I find endlessly moving about a woman in her 50s, 60s, 70s, a woman who the world might casually assume is past her most interesting chapters, discovering that she is, in fact, just now arriving